Welcome everyone. Today we are going to talk about Cape Coast and Elmina. Now Cape Coast is about 3 hours away from Accra. Okay, so it's it can be a day trip, although honestly, the idea of going like 3 hours and then going to visit the castles and then Kakum and then all the way back to Accra sounds like a crazy day. If you don't have time and that's all you have time for, go for it. But honestly, Cape Coast is worth a few days because besides the very important slave castles to visit in both Cape Coast and Elmina, there is actually a ton of stuff to do in Cape Coast. There's all sorts of fun stuff. So I'm going to start with the fun stuff and end with the heavy stuff because the heavy stuff is important and I want to give it its due. One of the biggest attractions around Cape Coast has to be Kakum National Park. And this place is great. It is all sorts of fun. And in fact, when I came in 2003, it was actually one of the deciding factors that made me pick Ghana as a destination. And what's really cool is you've got this rope canopy walkway. Okay, so first, let me talk to you about getting up to the walkway, and then I'll tell you how that goes because that's really cool. But you have to go up these stairs, and it's a small hike up a mountain, and they'll tell you it's like 15 minutes. I think even for an average person, it's probably closer to 25 or 30 minutes. But, you know, for me, well, let's put it this way. I was lagging behind the tour group because they do take you up in groups. Okay. And so I just catch up to them and then they'd move on. And I'd catch up to them and they'd move on. I'm slow on anything climbing. I make it. I get there, but I'm slow. And it's one of the places in Ghana that it's nice for me to have a hiking stick. Now, I'll tell you, when you get up there, if you are nervous about heights, don't worry. Okay, I don't want to dismiss your fears, but don't worry. The rope bridge is very safe. The cables come, almost up to my armpits. I mean, they're up really high. I actually did a live from being on the bridge. I was broadcasting straight from the bridge, but the bridge, even though it wobbles a little, is very stable. But do know that if you get partway in and get scared, there is a shortcut out, okay? At the beginning, you can do it so that you only have to go over 2, maybe 3 bridges, because there's just a shortcut out. Normally it's 7 bridges, and honestly, I love it. I think I've done Kakum 3 times, and it's just all sorts of fun. I'll be honest, though. The one thing is I was just a touch disappointed my first time doing it. You know why? Because I grew up on Indiana Jones and I had visions of, a nice challenging rope bridge. And I thought it was so safe and stable. I was actually disappointed that it didn't have a little more wobble going on. Seriously. So yeah, know that it's safe and stable and you're going to have all sorts of fun. But they do also have a nature walk where they'll take you around the forest and show you trees and birds and lizards and bugs and anything they can find, and they'll tell you about them. If you want to do the nature walk, tell them that you're doing that so that they'll basically keep you at the top and take you to that meeting point so you don't have to climb the stairs. You don't come down and have to climb the stairs back up again. But yeah, Kakum is absolutely worth your time. There's a little souvenir shop and a nice little cafe. As for getting there, I highly recommend just hiring a driver. And I will put my driver's information because Junior, he knows everything about Cape Coast. If you're going anywhere in Cape Coast and at any point when you need a driver, he is the man to call. He knows everything. He knows everyone. Okay, and he's a really nice guy and he's really honest. So I'll put my driver's information in the description so you can give him a call if you're going. But I do recommend a driver out to Kakum because there's not really an easy tro-tro drop-off point, which was, I think, about the only other way you could possibly get there. Next up, I'm going to talk about something that no one else talks about. And this was another thing I discovered in 2003. And I got to tell you a little story on this one because when I first went, okay, first of all, let me tell you what it is. It is finding Posuban. Now, let me tell you what a Posuban is. You'll sometimes hear Posuban Shrine, and they're actually slightly 2 different things. So let me give you a quick little bit of history. So in Ghana, the different tribes, or I should say the different villages, had Asafo companies. Okay, and those were basically the militia for the village, and they would protect the village. Well, the Posuban was where they kept the weapons. It was their meeting place. It was where they kept the weapons. So if someone said, hey, someone's coming to attack us, then they'd send out the call, and everyone would meet at the Posuban, and they'd get armed, and they'd go fight off the bad guys, whoever the bad guys were. And so that's what Posuban are. Some Posuban also have a shrine, and that would normally be if you see a Posuban and it has a tree with it. Usually it's a tree. And if there's a tree, and then that is a Posuban that is speaking to the deities. Okay, so that's what a Posuban is. When I first heard about them, it was back in 2003, and I had my Lonely Planet guidebook, and it suggests, it talked about them. And back then, I was fortunate enough when I got to Cape Coast, I met up with another traveler, and he had been backpacking, and he had done more of this than I had. And he knew how to negotiate the bush taxis to get out to these places. And then at that point in time, they were bush taxis. I mean, when we got out to the one all the way out in Mankesim, which is an important one, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But the one all the way out in Mankesim, I mean, we're talking, the taxis were going over basically dirt tracks, and I would barely call it a road. It was more like just a worn out area where the cars drove all the time. I mean, it wasn't even really a scoped out road. So they were truly bush taxis, and I was very fortunate to get that help that day. We had a great time. And when we got out to the one at Mankesim, well, the one at Mankesim is big, and it has all these statues on it. And I had seen some of the other ones. We had already been to some of the other ones, and I'll tell you about those in a sec. But if you notice, my perspective at the time, my first thought when I saw the Posuban was, kind of looks like miniature golf course figures. And it might just be a U.S. thing, I'm not sure. But to me, it looked a little like miniature golf, figures, although much more important. But I have to admit, that was my first impression, okay? But no, I got out there, and so this is 2003. We've gone through the bush taxi. It's a dusty area, kind of a dusty road going through there. And this guy comes out to tell us the story of the Posuban at Mankesim. And you can see, I'm showing you some footage here of the modern day version of it. And modern meaning only it has a really nice coat of paint on it. Other than that, it hasn't really changed. It's the same Posuban. It's the same statues and figures. But the guy that came out in 2003, I mean, he was like a character out of a book. He had on a baseball cap of some sort. And then he had all of 3 or 4 teeth, one of them with a gold cap. He had a fairly heavy accent, so I have to admit I only understood about half of what he was saying. And then he actually handed out a thing with the stories on it. But the thing is, it was a photocopy of something that had been made on a ditto machine. You remember the old mimeograph machines, the ones with the blue ink where you'd get high off of it if you stood there long enough? When you got your little test in front of you. Okay, I'm speaking to a certain generation there. You know who you are. You could tell it was like a photocopy made from a mimeograph. So that was kind of funny. And that was my experience then. Now, there's a big, shiny, perfectly paved road all the way out to Mankesim. There is no sense of bush taxi going through the woods and all that. It is very easy to get there. It's a little bit of a drive, but no further than Kakum, a different direction. But it is very much worth it because they still have the storyteller who comes out, and the gentleman who does it now is much easier to understand. You get the story, and there's like moral stories behind all of these, okay? Behind all of these figures and that. And to me, it's just one of those things that people don't do as tourists. You don't get to these places very often. And I say these places because these Posuban are spaced out in a variety of places around the Cape Coast area. The next best place to see Posuban is in Anomabu, okay? And there's something else going on in Anomabu, but there's about 7 Posuban in Anomabu if you want to go try and find all of them. Some of them are easier to find, some are a little harder. Some, the people will bug you for a little bit of money. Be prepared, just give a little bit. However, It is still very much worth doing, and they have some of the ones that are in better condition and well kept. Another thing is, if you go with Junior, there is a Posuban in his neighborhood, and this one, oh, I got to tell you this story, because right before we went there, my camera stopped working. That's when he got the priestess, and he called her over and convinced her to do a ceremony to help fix my camera at this Posuban. The first thing we had to do was to go buy some peach schnapps, and that was as an offering, a libation to the gods, okay? And so we go and we get the peach schnapps, and then we go back to the Posuban, and she starts doing this ceremony, okay? And, you know, it's got the chanting and the talking, and I don't know if it was just finally my brain clicked in, or if you want to say it was divine inspiration, but I figured out what was wrong with my camera. I figured it out, and I was able to fix it. And that all happened during the ceremony. So take it for what you will, but that was my deific intervention at a Posuban. So the Posuban always have interesting things around them. Now, if you go see the ones in Elmina, I have to admit, the ones in Elmina are not well kept. They are, I wouldn't make a special trip to Elmina just for that. There's other reasons to make a trip to Elmina. And one of them is the castle there and the tour that you get with the castle. But let's talk real quick about the other things to do in Elmina. And actually, mostly, it's just a street walking tour. The thing you want to walk around when you go to Elmina is they have a street market right near the castle. And it's a really fun, interesting street market. It's a very local street market. I did buy some fabric there, but that fabric I ended up giving away to someone. You're not there for souvenirs. You're there for the atmosphere. And Elmina's a fishing village. Okay, you should know that. Elmina is a fishing town. And so you're over the bridge, there's the harbor, and you can see all the boats. And, you know, it's a really interesting place visually. Some Posuban, and there's a Dutch cemetery, and there's some other things to see. And you can stop and get coconut. Oh man, I had the best coconut there. I'm not a big coconut fan. I don't really like the shredded coconut you buy in the bags and use in baking and all that. That's not my thing. But when you have coconut here and you drink it, you drink the juice, and then they open it up for you and they scoop out the center. And I just had the softest, best coconut there that day. But so Elmina's a cool town to walk around. And some people prefer to stay in Elmina because it's less hassle than Cape Coast. Cape Coast is very tourist oriented. Elmina is well worth an afternoon of walking. And actually, Cape Coast has a really good walking area too. Let me give you a little layout of Cape Coast. Cape Coast is not very big. Okay, I was on sort of the outer edge of town in the area around the STC bus station and the new KFC. The thing is, if you call a Bolt, which is the equivalent of an Uber, nothing in Cape Coast is more than 15 minutes away. Now, I'm not talking about things like Kakum and Mankesum for the Posuban. Those are like short drives. Those are, drives under an hour. But Cape Coast itself, Cape Coast Central, is very walkable. So you get a ride down into the center of things, and it's very easy to walk around a lot of Cape Coast. Oh, and by the way, this shirt, I got this fabric in Cape Coast while I was walking around doing the street tour thing. Forgot to say that in the main part of the video. But also, if you're enjoying this video, please drop a like, share it. I would love to share it. I really would love to grow and get this message out to more people. So like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. I would really appreciate it. Thanks. And they have an area called Market Stalls, and you'll find it on Google Maps. And you can just walk around and do the market thing. And it's all sorts of fun. And then if you want to keep going, you can make your way around to the castle. Now, the one thing I will tell you is that the touts at the castle, the people trying to sell you stuff or to be your guide or many other things, they get a little pushy. So I'm going to recommend that you sort of keep your shields up a little bit. Be polite, but keep your shields up so that you just have a no thank you until you see something you're interested in. just be aware of that. It's not a total turnoff. It's not a horrible situation. Also know that inside of Cape Coast Castle, just as you enter, before you get to any admission gate or anything, there's a set of shops, and they're a little bit more mellow. They're not as pushy, and there's a little cafe in there too. And then, of course, there are the beaches. Let me tell you a little bit about the beaches. Okay, so there's some that you can just walk down to. Most of them have a hotel or resort or restaurant or something attached to them. And you can do something like buy a water and keep walking and try and get out of having to pay. Or you can just sit down, relax, and resign yourself to buying something. Okay? We went to Anomabu Beach. That's another thing you can do. When I said there was something else in Anomabu, sorry, I didn't mention it earlier. But there's a beach resort there. And you can go to the beach resort, you can order a plate of fries and a couple of drinks, and you're set. And you can have all afternoon in this gorgeous spot. And you can do that, do your Posuban hunt, and then go to the beach resort. So there's no official admission fee, except you kind of got to buy something, or they will charge an admission fee. Another spot you can go to is Fosu Lagoon, and you can take a nice little boat ride around the lagoon, and that's kind of fun. If you're there, do it. It's fun. And you can just relax there. Again, they have a couple of restaurant-y kind of places, and you can sit and have a bite to eat. One of the other things that happens there is they have this big festival in usually September. It's Oguaa, Fetu, Afahye, I believe is the right way to say it. But it's a big festival. It lasts 4 or 5 days. But one of the things they do is boat races at the lagoon. And I went in 2019, and that was really fun. That was fun. And they competed. Remember I mentioned the Asafo companies? They competed by Asafo company. So each company had its own costume or uniform. And you can see the different people in the crowd were rooting for different groups, that sort of thing. So a lot of events happen at that lagoon. One of the other places people like to go when they're in Cape Coast is a place called Hans Cottage Botel. And it is a hotel. You might end up staying there. But it also has lunch, and they have like a lagoon, and they have a spot with crocodiles. And supposedly the crocodiles will come up on the land. I think they'll let you touch them. I've done a couple of places where I've been able to interact and touch crocodiles. When I went this time, it was the wrong time of year. It was the wrong part of mating season, so they weren't coming up on the thing. If you want to catch it on your way back from Kakum National Park, that's kind of the perfect time to do it. If you want to stop there and have lunch, it's a nice little place to have lunch. So that's something else you can do while you're in Cape Coast. As you can see, there is a whole bunch of fun stuff to do in Cape Coast. So when you're traveling here, I highly recommend that if you can give Cape Coast a few days, you're not going to be disappointed. There is plenty to do, and I highly recommend the Posuban quest because it's all sorts of fun. And as I say, there's a lot to do here. And one of the things you need to do is you need to go to Cape Coast Castle and Elmina Castle, also known as St. George's Castle, and learn about the slave trade. Okay, you need to understand this. Cape Coast Castle was run by the British, and I'm not going to give you the big history. This isn't a documentary, but tens of thousands, if not hundreds, just hundreds of thousands, I'm sure, of people were processed through there and sent to North, Central, and South America as slaves. Thousands and thousands of people died there. Thousands and thousands of people died on the way. And when you go down in these dungeons, you're down in this small area, and you're told that up to 1,000 people could be kept there. 1,000 people in that space. That'd be half my high school kept in that space. And I don't even know how they distributed food. And then you have, of course, had all of the human waste. And the thing is, the tour is not, it's interesting because the tour is not highly biased. It doesn't sit there and say, oh, these people were evil and they did this and they did that. And it's not an aggressive make you feel bad to her. They tell you the facts. They tell you the truth about what happened. And as I say, they tell you the truth. And it's your own self that fills in the story. There is no way after you go to these castles. I'll tell you about Elmina in just a moment. But there's no way after going to these castles that you can ever think there was anything good about slavery. There were no benefits. There was no, hey, it wasn't so bad. It just, I mean, they were treated like cattle.
They were using for the exchange. Once they are done exchanging the captives, all of them are brought down to this forecourt for branding. All because in the castle, different merchants were in here for the trade. So one company or one group can take ownership of all of them. So they will set fire, place in metals that had their embossed designs underneath them. And when a metal is seen red hot, moving from the fire into an oil, as a meal directly onto your chest, your shoulder, or your back.
You know, and it's horrible. It's disgusting. Anyone involved in it is morally corrupt, and there is no excuse.
English had the church, the name Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. Today we call it Anglican Church of England. So they worship up there, whilst others as well stayed right beneath them.
You know, I don't care if they had a dang chapel or a church sitting right on the premises. Those people were morally corrupt and evil as well. It's as simple as that. When I first went I've done the Cape Coast tour 3 times now. And when I first went in 2003, it was an eye-opener. Now, I did not have a super whitewashed history when I went to school. You know, we were told that slavery was bad. We were told that of all the horrible stuff that happened. It didn't have the gravity that going to Cape Coast has. I mean, you're a kid, you know, it's done at an age level, but we weren't told it was anything but awful. And there was the miniseries Roots. I mean, you know, I wasn't blind to it, but the first time you go, it will have an impact on you. Then, you know, I thought, okay, I've had that impact. And then I went back with Tim in 2019. And for those of you who don't know, Tim was my husband. He passed away in 2022, but he was Black American. And at one point during the tour, it just struck me that if his ancestors hadn't gone through that and survived that, he wouldn't be there. He wouldn't be there with me. And I'm telling you my perspective. I know everyone is going to have a different perspective. And I know people of the diaspora, you have an entirely different response and perspective. And I fully respect that. And I'm just telling you my response because that's all I can offer you. You know, that's all I can offer you with true honesty. And I just had that revelation that if his ancestors hadn't been strong enough to survive that and years and years and years of being enslaved, he wouldn't have been there. And that just put another layer on the story for me. And as I say, there is nothing good you can say about slavery, period. So let me tell you, the castle at Cape Coast, the British one, is kind of big. And the thing is, if it had been just a trading post, it would be beautiful. It's actually, you know, the way it sits on the thing, and then the cannons are kind of cool, poking out over the ocean and all that. It could be a beautiful place if it had only ever just been a trading post. You know, you'd say, oh, this is a leftover piece of architecture. I know, colonialism sucks too. But you could say at least, you know, it was visually attractive, but it is so ugly because of its history, you can't say that. But the one over in Elmina is Dutch. It was Dutch owned, and it was smaller, and it has always felt darker and a little more sinister to me. I'm not saying it was more sinister. I mean, they were both awful. They were both horrible. But I think the thing that made it feel more sinister is they will take you through, and they will take you, and this is the last place. You might have heard of the term the door of no return, and I'm going to go back to Cape Coast to discuss that as well. But in Elmina, the door of no return, you have to go through, and it's a really dark cell that you go through. And then you have to duck down to get through to the next room, where you can kind of stand up again. You can stand up again, but they knew that the people that had been there, because the ships to come take them would come about every 3 months. So, they were expecting prisoners to be having been in captivity for 3 months, or, approximately 3 months. They knew that they were going to be so thin and so emaciated by the end of that captivity. The space that they had to squeeze through to get to the boats that would take them away from their home forever was only like this wide and about this tall. I mean, that was just, it's like, really, you knew you were going to destroy these people to the point where they could fit through that. And that one always really bothered me about the one in Elmina. That made it more sinister. And there's also a cell in Elmina. I'm not saying they didn't have this kind of cell in Cape Coast, but there's one they point out where the bad slaves went, and they were basically thrown in there and left to die. You went in, you did not come out. That sort of thing. There was a cell for slight misbehaviors, and then there was a cell that, hey, you ain't coming out again. And so Elmina always felt darker to me.
Once you walk out of the door, there's no way you're coming back. You lose your right as a human being, you lose your connection with your people, and as well, you get to lose your identity as an African.
The gate of no return. Now, this is actually a good part of the story, sort of. That door of no return might have been the same at Cape Coast, but now it's a big door. And it's a big door partly because they're on a mission, and I think they've done about 5 or 6 of these, to make it now from the other side. Okay, if you go out the door of no return now, you get on this little spit of land, and I mean, I've seen them playing football out there. Okay, and on the other side, when you come back in, it says door of return. Okay, and that is a welcoming back for anyone in the diaspora to come back to Africa, to come back home, and it's a welcome home. And I love that they've reclaimed the narrative, and they're making it their own, and they they're changing the story. They're changing the story to look towards a better future. And I think that is awesome. So it's important. I don't care what background you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care how rich or poor you are. It's important to go there and understand. And this is why I left the castles for last, because I knew it was going to be a heavy topic. And the thing is, Cape Coast has a whole lot going on. And that's the thing. It's rich. And just go to Cape Coast, enjoy it, experience it, and let it enrich you, because that's what Cape Coast does. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time.